Hi, I'm Femi Okay.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream.
Banging pots and pans, thousands of Argentines took to the streets this month to protest what they call debilitating economic reforms.
We look at the challenges citizens are facing and find out what's being done to address the needs of the country's most vulnerable. Argentines are mobilizing on and offline to voice their concerns over President Mauricio Macri's economic policies. Rising unemployment and steep tax hikes on basic services are just some of the issues hitting home for many. Now, Emma is just one of several people sharing experiences online. She tweeted in, "Our electricity bill is 4 times more expensive than last year, and our gas bill is 10 times more expensive. It's hard to make ends meet, and we're only 3.
Now the president says that the reforms are needed to move the country forward, but critics argue these measures are negatively impacting low-income families, many of whom are already struggling to pay the bills. To help us talk about this, we're joined by Mark Weisbrot, co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research in Washington, D.C. Evan Patella is the Secretary for Federal Integration and International Cooperation in Argentina's Ministry of Culture. Juan Marino is an activist coming to us from Buenos Aires. And Mariano Lopez is a professor of Latin American literature and cultural studies at NYU. Gentlemen, good to have you here. Where should we start, Malika?
With a little slice of life, because we've heard so many personal stories from people. So I'm going to share just 2. Mariano, this is a tweet we got from Alma. She says, "We don't have money for anything. The little that I spend on food, like meat and dairy, I now spend on transport." So that's one story. Here's another. This is a video comment that we got from Maria Lidia. Have a listen.
Hola, mi nombre es Lidia.
Hi, my name is Maria Lidia, and I live in Villa Lugano. The tarifazo affected me and my family. My brother is unemployed, and he worked in construction. I'm fighting and looking for work, and I'm part of the TPR. The truth is that this president has affected us all, and we want him to leave.
So she mentions that she's a member of a protest group. Mariano, what are you hearing from people on how life is right now?
Well, it certainly depends on where you are and what kind of circles you circulate in, but basically this is affecting everybody, not only people that come from what you would call the lower classes or working class, but also, for instance, people at university, teaching at public universities, or students, which are more like from middle classes, that are also being very affected, not only in their households, but also in the institutions they go to, because universities have also received really high, this tarifazo is also happening there as well. And a lot of universities actually have had trouble to pay these bills, and some of them have even, said that maybe they didn't know if they had the money to go through the end of the year, So this is, it's visible, it's palpable. Ivan was referring before to the polls that say that the approval of the president is very high, and maybe they are right, although we all know that polls are usually bought by administrations to tell whatever they need them to tell in different ways. We're very used to this in Argentina and everywhere else. What I can say is that what I see in the streets and in the places where I teach and the places where different places I go to, like cultural centers, art galleries, museums, is the same talk of this tarifazo being really dramatic, abrupt, and having consequences not only in private lives, but also in the way in which the institutions work.
So, Evan, there's a picture behind me that I noticed said no al tarifazo, no to the tax hikes. How do you respond to that? What do you make of that?
The energy hikes, not the tax hikes.
The energy hikes. Thank you.
Yeah. I think facts matter, quite frankly. And one fact is that, yes, of course, an increase in the energy bills has affected a lot of people. That's a fact. We know it, and we work every day to try to protect, in particular, the most vulnerable segments of our population from that tariff hike. So that's a fact. Another fact is that even with the hike today, 70% of the energy bills of households is still subsidized by the government. That gives you a measure of how far behind we were. And also, since facts matter, I want to mention, because education matters perhaps the most, and our president is very passionate about education, that it is not true that the universities cannot handle the increased energy bills, among other things, because this government has increased the budget for universities from the budget we inherited last year by 500 million pesos. As an immediate response to the concerns of the universities in terms of how the energy bills might affect them.
Not
So,
enough, Ivan, I'm sorry.
we need to handle
Because
the facts.
you're saying that, I'm sorry, your facts are super important. You're saying that there has been an increase, but you're giving the numbers. And actually, what's important is to know what that increase means in terms of percentage, because the truth of the matter is that there has been an increase in the budget for universities, but that increase in percentage does not match the increase in inflation. So actually, a lot of the national universities have increased.
And we accept that, of course. I mean, we accept the fact that Argentina is in a difficult economic time and that we're working hard to get past it.
Let me show you something that kind of
we know that.
backs up the difficult economic time. Give you an illustration of the difficult economic time that Argentina is going through. So this comes from the AFP, which is a news agency. Social fridges open in Argentina as poverty rises. So the so-called social solidarity fridges, where people basically leave food for those who need it, they're popping up in Argentina right now. Mark, what do you make of that? What is that telling you about what's happening?
Well, you know, they had a lot of experience with this. They had this terrible depression from 1998 to 2002. And this was the reason that the Kirchner government and the one right before it was elected, because this experiment in what people call neoliberalism and economists call neoliberalism failed miserably. I mean, this was like our Great Depression in terms of the amount of GDP that was lost. It pushed half the country, which was one of the richest countries in the Americas, in Latin America, pushed them, half the people, below poverty. So people have experience with this, and they have reason to believe that this right-wing neoliberal government, that this is just the beginning of a terrible mismanagement.
Quite frankly,
it's
you're
very
throwing
possible.
out labels which don't apply to reality. I mean, I need to stress once again,
well,
in no time in Argentine history have more people received social subsidies from the government. In no time in Argentine history. There is no way this government can be called right-wing, neoliberal, whatever you want to call it. Name one thing that we've privatized since we were elected government. I mean, quite frankly,
they've only been there 6 months.
We're not stupid. I mean, we learned.
I can name a lot of things against people.
Mauricio Macri and this government is a political party that emerged actually from the 2001-2002 crisis. You know, we are the children of that crisis.
Let me just hear Juan for a moment. Juan, you had a response to
we know the mistakes that were made, and in no way will we repeat those mistakes because we're not those people.
Juan, pick up. Go ahead.
Yes, I think it's important to show how these policies are affecting people in the real life. There is an example of an unemployed man he had 30 years. He was bricklayer, he couldn't get a job, and he received these hikes in the rates, in the energy. He couldn't pay it. 3,000 pesos he had to pay, he couldn't pay it, so he committed suicide. Another man, 50 years old, also unemployed, he couldn't pay the energy bill, so he went to the roof to make his own connection to electricity, and he died electrocuted. In the poor neighborhoods in Buenos Aires, there is no natural gas. They need bottled gas, and they can't get bottled gas at the social gas cylinder the government says they have. They don't install centers of distribution of this cylinder gas, so people can't pay it also. People are dying of cold. In Córdoba, a province in Argentina, it has increased the number of people that die from diseases generated by the winter. So it's not true that this is a government that has helped the most quantity of poor people in Argentina. For example, there is a study of the Argentinian Catholic University, which supported Macri, that says that since Macri took office, there are 5 more million poor people in Argentina. Now, 34.5% of the people in Argentina is poor. And I think that the most important thing that you have to know is that 2 weeks ago, there has been a national protest, a popular rebellion, this pan protest where all the people in Argentina, in all the provinces, went to the streets against the rate hikes, these ridiculous rate hikes that you are showing in your program. This is responsibility. This is Macri's responsibility because it's his politics, and his politics are inviable because people can't pay the bill.
So, Juan, there are a couple of people online who agree with you. This is Alma. She says, seeing Macri supporters now banging pots and pans is a result of what she calls the bruto tarifazo, these high tax increases. What the president means now, his name is synonymous with hunger and plunder. Here's another view from someone else on Twitter. This is Emma. She says, I participated in the protests in one province. Every form of protest is necessary right now. So two people and their view. On Facebook Live, though, Ivan, we got this comment because we're seeing these protests, and this is what some protesters want. Christian says, I want to ask Ivan, what do you think about the possible resignation of the energy minister, the former CEO of Shell?
Well, you know, if Aranguren, who's the current Minister of Energy, had been Minister of Energy for the past 10 years, we wouldn't be in this problem. Because quite frankly, we're in this problem because of the mess that was made with the energy sector in Argentina before. But, you know, I want to go back to some of the comments that I think it was Juan who made. And then, you know, I must say, I have utmost respect for the work that many social organizations do. They have for the past 10 years, not just now, but for the past 10 years, been a barrier to poverty and been a social network and social welfare net for many people who the state has not been able to reach. And they've done a very good job, and they play an important role. But, you know, quite frankly, you know, it is just not true, unfortunately, to say that this government has not placed its energy on protecting those who are most in need. Of course, there's probably many more things we can do, and there's probably more energy that we can apply, and there's probably and likely mistakes that we have made. But we have, and otherwise it would be inexplicable, a lot of support precisely from the poorest parts of the population. You know, and people aren't stupid. They know that we work every day to try to get through this and make their lives better.
I think that Ivan is not taking into account the fact that poor people has gone to the streets not only one time 2 weeks ago. For example, the day after the PAN protest, there was a mobilization of these piquetero organizations, these unemployed organizations Ivan is talking about. I am a part of Tendencia Piquetera Revolucionaria, Piquetero Revolutionary Tendency, and there was a protest with 100 popular pots, these social fridges you say, in the streets, because people are hungry and the government isn't giving a response to all the popular organizations. That's why, because we are going to have a second PAN protest on August the 4th. On August the 7th, there will be a national mobilization of piquetero organizations all over the country. On August the 9th, there will be a mobilization to Plaza de Mayo in front of the Pink House. It's the White House in Argentina.
May I commend you for your ability to advertise your upcoming protest, but let me interrupt you just for a moment to say to Mark, the idea of President Macri's mandate was he wanted to eliminate poverty. That is a very honourable mandate to have. Has it gone wrong? Could you say it's gone wrong so in just the first few months of his presidency? Is that possible, or does he just need more time?
No, it definitely has gone wrong. I mean, poverty is increasing according to the study from, as I mentioned before, from the Catholic University.
You know that study has a methodological problem, of course, that it didn't take into account the increase in the social subsidies by the government.
And gentlemen,
may I just ask
you for a quick recap, because this happened in Program 1, which was in a previous edition of the stream. So previously on the stream, you said what?
Yeah, well, they found an increase in the first 3 months, so it's over 6 months now. And but in the first 3 months, there was an increase in 1.4 million people in poverty. I think you're going to find it no matter what you look at. Inflation has been, as I said, it's gone up at a rate of 60% for the first half of the year, and wages are not keeping up with it. So you're going to have people push below the poverty line. There's no doubt about that. And the thing is, it's also hitting the whole macro economy, because as people have less purchasing power and they buy less, that's part of the reason why you have a recession now, and the economy is shrinking. So This is
it's only in a few months. You're saying the policies have gone wrong?
6 months, and it's gone as wrong as you could. I mean, much. They didn't really expect this. They didn't understand this. You say that it's not neoliberal. The head of the central bank stood up and said that you weren't even going to get inflation from these energy price increases, and that was really an extreme statement, and it turned out to be completely wrong.
Mariano, what did you say?
No, but that you are saying, you're asking, I think, well, I'm in the dark because I'm saving energy myself, but you were asking if these policies have gone wrong, and I think that they haven't gone wrong. That's the policies that they wanted to advance and propose. This is what they wanted to do. It's not a mistake. This is what they are trying to do in line with this idea that Mark was explaining. This is a neoliberal project. Very clearly, and Ivan was saying, we are not the same people, we are not going to make the same mistakes, but actually some of the people that are now in the government are the same ones that were in the government with President de la Rúa in the past and President Menem in the past, who were precisely the two presidents that led us to the huge crisis that Mark was talking about at the end of the 90s. So they are at some point...
This is an interesting point, but I think we're getting into micro Argentine politics.
The president of the central bank was involved with what is called the mega country.
So Mariano and Ivan, remember we have an international audience watching here, and this part two of this conversation was important because we wanted to see what was the impact on Argentines in the first 6 or 7 months of President Macri's presidency. So bringing us back on point, Mariano, keeping us to our focus today, what did you want to add?
Yeah. Going to that, Juan was mentioning before that the ones you're talking about, is not the only protest. And actually, there were also huge protests before as well. In April, there was a huge demonstration by the university students, the university teachers, and university working people against the adjustment in the budget for the universities, for national universities. It was a huge protest that actually helped that Macri's government reversed some of the policies towards universities. And then in May the 1st, which is, as you know, Labor Day everywhere but in the US, there was a huge demonstration by the trade unions, also with a lot of critical points against the Macri's policy. And then we have this, which are the most spontaneous protests, if you want, with social organizations like the one Juan belongs to and others, protesting the tarifazo and in general how the cost of living have gone up to levels that are impossible to sustain, I would say.
So you mentioned levels impossible to sustain. You also mentioned that you're in the dark because you're preserving energy. I want to share another story. This is Natalia on Twitter. She says, yesterday I couldn't buy oil. 95 pesos per bottle. That's about $6.35 US dollars. It eliminates this item from the working class's basic food basket. And she uses a hashtag saying that these price hikes are deadly. Another person seeing this conversation asks this question. This is Aguma on Twitter, who says, it's great that we're discussing the problem, but how and what can the Argentinian government do to solve the issue? Juan, do you want to address that?
Yes, of course. I think that this government is not capable of giving a solution because its program is the tarifazo, it's the rate hikes. So that's why we think that the National Congress in Argentina should start the process of impeachment, the constitutional process of impeachment, because these policies are part of our overall program, right-wing program against poor people.
Juan, how realistic? Juan, hold on a minute. How realistic is this? I mean, this is a president who was voted in. He took office in December. 7 months later, you maybe object to his policies, but isn't there a democratic process? Ivan, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Because fortunately, an overwhelming majority of Argentines supports this government, believes this government is working for them, and is optimistic about the future. But something I want to stress, because it came out in this conversation and I find it peculiar, that it's one thing to say, look, we think you're making a mistake and maybe you should do something else. It's another thing to say, which came out in a few comments, we think you're evil. We think that on purpose you're trying to hurt the Argentine people. And really, that's just ludicrous. And it's a conversation stopper. I mean, that's a conversation stopper for democracy. And at no point in the past 10 years has there been a better and more fluid dialogue between the Argentine government and the opposition, between the president and the governors, and between the government and the civil society.
So tell us about the civil society dialogue that you're actually having, because Juan, they just listed off a whole load of protests that were coming up. How are you dealing with the protesters? How are you dealing with their complaints and grievances?
That's an excellent question. I mean, you know, and if you're not in the middle of Argentine politics, it's hard from the outside for foreigners, you know, people listening to us, to differentiate between protests from civil society and protests from civil society organizations, which are basically part of opposition political parties or radicalized political parties. And every protest is valid. That is, we're a big believer in Argentina in protesting. You know, that's practically a part of a political tradition. But for example, our National Minister of Social Affairs, Carolina Stanley, has an excellent relationship with many piquetero groups and many community organizations and works hand in hand with them. I mean, there is no tide that has been severed if the other counterpart is open to dialogue and working as a team and cooperating.
Will the energy hikes continue, or will you listen to the protesters and cap them?
Well, they've already been capped. They've already been capped.
So no more price hikes?
Well, no more price hikes in the near term.
In the near
they've
future.
been capped.
That's not true.
Yeah.
That's not true. That's not true.
They've been
there
capped.
has
They've
been
capped at
a press
400%.
conference. There has been a press conference of Aranguren, Energy Minister, and Macri, saying that in October there will be a new audience on this subject, and that there, in the end of this year, there will be a new rate hike. That was stated by the government in the mass media.
All right, so gentlemen, let me see if I can reunite you on one thing here. I'm going to show you a picture here. This is a supermarket wholesaler. Just have a listen to this. People are worried that goods are going to prices are going to go up high, and they are running around this wholesaler trying to buy up stock before the prices go up. So, Ivan, what do you make of this in Argentina? I'm just wondering who's benefiting so far of the 7 months of President Macri's presidency and the fast way he's implemented reforms?
I'm not sure that's Argentina, to be quite frank, but maybe it is. You know, and again, inflation is a problem. We recognize that, and we're working every day to try to lower inflation. I should mention that, you know, other economists and economists from opposing political parties have openly stated that they already see inflation going down once, I stress to be accurate, once you eliminate the tarifazo. And usually when you measure inflation, you do not take into account, you know, one-time hikes in prices. So, you know, we're making a huge effort for that. A huge effort, because we recognize for the past at least 6 or 7 years, inflation has been perhaps the most onerous tax on those who have the least.
So then here's a suggestion from Mark on Twitter. Lionel says we need to undo these hikes, give jobs to the unemployed, and the resources can be found in taxes to the big exporters, which Macri eliminated. You like those suggestions?
Yeah, well, some of that is, I think some of that's reasonable. I think there are a lot of things they can do. As I mentioned before, you know, the country does not have a balance of payments crisis. They can now borrow on international markets, and they've been doing it. They have sufficient reserves. So they don't have to have this kind of austerity in a recession, you know. They don't have to, and again, with the inflation, you're eroding people's real wages, their purchasing power. So you have a real problem with just trying to make the economy recover under the policies that the president is implementing.
But no economy has ever recovered in 7 months, or has it?
Well, but it's gotten worse. I mean, it's definitely gotten worse.
Have you seen the job report that shows that job growth increased by 70,000 jobs this trimester?
Yeah, I saw that. At the private sector was 3.3%, and the public sector lost 154,000 jobs.
Juan, Marino, and Mariano Lopez. You have the last words. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. We're talking about Argentina, the economic reforms of President Macri, and his first 7 months of his presidency. Thanks for being part of this conversation. It will continue online. #AJStream. Thanks, everybody. Take care.